Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I think we are in many different time zones, right? From the early morning in Eastern United States to late night in Korea and everything in between, more or less. I am Nick von Ortes. I am going to moderate this meeting today. This is the last of 5 workshops that you may have attended or not. If you have not, they have all been recorded and they are available. Actually, if you look at the bottom of the announcement of this event, you will find the place where the previous recordings are available. So this is a series of workshops that was organized some time ago. This is the last one. It's an overview, and the workshops were related to a book that is about to be published by Oxford University Press. And this is on the challenges of of technology and economic catching up in emerging economies. Now, one of the speakers will introduce the book today. All I want to do is to say a couple of things about what is gonna happen today. So we are going to have 3 introductions at the beginning from 3 of the 5 editors of the book. Jeong-Dong Lee, Dirk Meissner, and Slavo Radosevic will discuss the book overview, some key findings, and the future research agenda. So each one of them will take, I don't know, 10 minutes, maximum 15. And then we have 3 distinguished external discussants. Yongsuk Jang from STEPI in Korea, the Science, Technology and Policy Institute of Korea. We have Sergio Sales Filho. Professor Sales is at Unicamp in the University of Campinas, that is, in Brazil. He's a colleague of mine there. He is director of the Institute of Geosciences, where the Department of Science and Technology is. And he will offer some comments. And then we have Alfred Watkins. Dr. Watkins is very well known in our community. He has worked and published many things during 2 decades that he was at the World Bank, and since then he has been actually extremely active in promoting the application of technologies in developing countries. So he is a chairman of the Global Solutions Summit, and he is the senior director of the P80 Group Foundation. If the initials, if these do not mean much to you, it's what I said is he is very focused on application in developing countries. So we thank him very much for this, because we academics tend to talk about theories, but then the application sometimes lags. So the 3 external discussants, and they are all extremely knowledgeable, and they have dealt with the subject for a very long time. For example, Yongsuk Jang, I didn't introduce him properly. He is, some of you may know him from his long-term service at the OECD. He is now Vice President of the Council for Science Technology Policy of the OECD. So all of them have extensive experience around the world, and we are very, very happy to have them all 3 here today to discuss the overall findings of the book. So without further ado, I want to start with the first speaker. Let me just mention that we will try to keep the presentations in 1 hour. So please keep within your time in 1 hour so that we open the floor for discussion in the second hour. The second hour should be discussion with the audience. And among the panelists. Okay, without further ado then, I want to invite Professor Lee, Jeong-Dong Lee from Seoul National University. He's extremely well known around the world, and he's currently serving as special advisor to the president of South Korea on economy and science. Jeong-Dong, the floor is yours.
Okay, can you see the slide?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. My job today, today is to briefly introduce the book itself, about the structure. And based on my email record, I found out that the project has started in 2016. So already 5 years passed. And our 5 editors met together and then decided to go this project. And finally, we collected 16 chapters with 30 authors. And we divided the whole book into 4 themes. The first, country level capability analysis. And secondly, we try to analyze the capability at the sectoral level. And we also try to accommodate emerging issues, some emerging issues. And finally, we try to provide some policy implications based on our analysis. So today, I'm going to be very brief to show each chapter just one line of sentence. The first chapter, written by Falkberg, talks about the role of capability and its components, such as technology, education, and governance, and show the contribution to growth of technological capability at the national level. And our second chapter talks about a new approach to the measurement of capability and suggests the concept of technology upgrading in terms of scale and scope and their correlation to country income levels. And our third chapter talks about 2 different capabilities called implementation capability and design capability. And the middle income trap is the result of the failure of the transition failure from implementation capability to design capability across economic development. And the last chapter at the country level talks about the different strategies of leapfrogging and alternative the ways of leapfrogging called path skipping and path creating. And this chapter specifically provide policy recommendations for developing countries, how they can take path skipping or creating strategy. And at the sectoral level, the country level analysis is written by Raud, and he adopted all taxonomies developed by OECD and so on, and shows changing morphology of technology or innovation upgrading based on the form level CIS data sets. And if we move to the sectoral level analysis, our first chapter talks about very interesting case studies of shipbuilding and offshore industry in Brazil, and explores the kind of semi-failure stories. And the other one is technological learning strategy and upgrading intensity in the mining industry. Another very good example from Brazil, and explores how domestic mining firms have successfully exploited the changing windows of opportunity. And another interesting case came from Korea, and upgrading non-technological capability. And the cases came from three major cases from Korea: small nuclear reactors, and nuclear power plant construction, and high-speed trains. And if we move on to the emerging issues, the first one is sustainability. So the author tries to talk about the normal transition from imitation to innovation may delay the adoption of sustainable alternatives. And the author tries to explore the alternative way. How can we make a harmonization? Matthews provide very interesting example of China in terms of sustainability. And the paper introduced China as one of the most vivid example of the shift from the techno-economic regime based on fossil fuels toward the regime based on green growth. And Savona showed the kind of framework to accommodate the issue of inclusion together with innovation. So innovation may also be inclusive, thus generating inclusive structural change. And this paper shows quite interesting causal loops. Another also interesting paper in this sustainability issue came from Mexico, and the authors developed a new agenda which could be labeled as a political economy of technology accumulation. And so this paper talks about the interlinked kind of loop between among political, social, and environmental factors. And Gao, in terms of policy issues, tried to show the large-scale programs in China, and to show how to develop technological capability based on the help of state-owned enterprises in terms of innovation. And another very interesting issue in terms of policy agenda is global value chains. And this chapter provides a state-of-the-art understanding of research on policies, ranging from policy to attract or join value chains to policy to upgrade through global value chains. And our last chapter, interestingly, talks about the question rarely explored in research on innovation policy. So how policymakers should go about implementing new policy. So this chapter is the only chapter which talks about the implementation issue based on experimentation or evidence-based policymaking. So based on these 16 chapters, we try to show the state of the art of the discussion in technological capability from national level to sectoral level, and also emerging issues and policy agendas. So I'm going to stop here. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, JD. Let's go directly to Dirk Meissner, who will give us a selected few main messages from the book, key findings. Dirk is he's working in Russia. He's originally from Germany. He is a professor and deputy head, actually, of the Institute of Statistical Studies and Economics of Knowledge, or ISEC, for some of you, at the Higher School of Economics, National Research University in Moscow. So Dirk, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Nick. So I give you a short overview of the key findings which we had so far. Okay, got it here now. In principle, when you read the book, you will find in the first instance, and that is also in line with the recent experience in course of the pandemic, there's a certain complexity in the value chain. Emerging countries increasingly try to conquer place, becoming OEM, and then extending beyond the OEM role, extending towards higher value generation at home. However, they face a certain problem in catching up, since there's strong dominance of multinationals on the globe, and the multinational is usually considering emerging economy as a place for manufacturing, partly by going along the value chain, developing further. That implies for emerging economies building the home-based capacities. The big question is which capacities and how and in which framework. But that leads us also to some smart specialization discussion. I'll come to that in a second. Second, there is the technological paradigm, and we see it currently in the new generation of general purpose technologies or platform technologies. Take it for everything related to digital technologies, internet technologies, etc., which are in place, which are diffused, widely accepted. However, the legal frameworks and the national frameworks are usually lagging much behind technology diffusion. This is a big problem. There's a lot of gray zone, which also causes several problems and misunderstandings, even at the political level, between countries, which causes additional investment and efforts required by companies, because they always have to adjust to national requirements if they are known. And such legal requirements are frequently changing at a very high speed. So this is not very much an incentive. Developing products, introducing new products in the market if you don't have a reliable framework. Next point is about sustainability. And sustainability here refers in the first instance, of course, to sustainable development goals imposed by the United Nations at the beginning of the century. But let me stress also the point for sustainability, especially emerging countries, let them be OEMs or go beyond in case of development, engineering technologies, and education of talent. They need to bear in mind that very likely highly developed countries will impose additional regulations and standards on products which meet sustainability criteria in the near future. That requires a change in the paradigm and the mindset, how you approach designing products and services. They should be ecologically friendly. While we are talking now, there is this international climate summit going on, organized by the United States, and we are talking exactly about that. Exactly. We want to reduce the carbon dioxide emissions and things like that, but that goes beyond in terms of sustainability. This means save the environment and save ecology. In order doing that, we can be sure that policy will impose additional tougher rules and regulations, which should be in the mindset already of talent, of young scholars and the next generation of skilled labor on the market. This is a long-term effort, but policy might react a bit faster. In line also about the sustainability discussion and sustainable growth is the rising inequality. So the merits or the margin is increasingly distributed to a few, whereas the majority remains at the same level, income level, maybe at a poor level. There is certainly for politics and field for action. Last but not least, our finding, and when you read the 16 chapters, you will approve and you will agree, smart specialization, as we know it so far, has been a nice attempt, but it needs to be upgraded. Let's call it smart specialization 2.0 or whatsoever. It will go into, or has to go into line with industrial policies revision by means of specialization is something nice, but it's just the tip of the iceberg. A highly specialized country, our national innovation system, will not be able to compete for a long time on the global market. You still require, you still need the backbone, which is the basic industries, and on top of that, you specialize. Without the backbone, you run danger of disturbance of global value chains. Take the latest development, what we see in the semiconductor industry. So most highly specialized industries in developed countries, but also in emerging countries, depend on a few OEMs based in Taiwan. There might be political problems, there might be pandemic problems, etc., etc. And then you have along the value chain, much disturbance, and you cannot simply replace it. At the same time, looking at the smart specialization in the pharma industry, have a look at Europe. Europe is not capable of producing vaccines. They gave it up. They gave up the business for long. However, they did strong investment still in the basic underlying technology development without any certain outcome. But then we were pretty much capable of rather quickly developing respective vaccine for this pandemic. Same in Russia. They did very, very long without any application in mind, basic investment and basic research. And then they could fine-tune, they could convert it. But the industrial structure not being in place, and that requires a long time to build it. That means smart specialization, yes, but certainly not without underlying backbone and basic industries. Last but not least, the question is, what about qualified labor? And the stress is on qualified. So it requires also a mindset, a change in mindset at the policy level, at the global scale. So stop these endless rankings, who has most tertiary education graduates. If you just count the numbers, it's wonderful, but you need to measure quality. That is exactly what we see. We see all these rankings all the time, and when the country thinks, oh, we are well prepared because we have the biggest number of PhD holders. But when you look behind, what does it mean holding a PhD in that country, in that country, in that country? This is not uniform. It's much in the hands. So I believe the mindsets might change, go towards more like the sustainability thinking, and not just the pure numbers as we know it now, where politics frequently announces we are the most creative, we are most innovative, whatever, because most of our population holds tertiary education degree. This is an inflation. So this cycle, I believe, that will end. So that is what also I take from reading the 16 chapters in our book. And I'm looking forward, after you read our book, that you confirm or you tell me, no, we are absolutely wrong. Everything is possible. I'm not saying that I'm always right, except when I'm talking to Nick, but at the same time, vice versa. So what remains in place for sure is for this specialization and industrial policies, a long-term vision, a longer-term consideration, and the introduction of a balanced approach of investments. So get a little bit away from the short term, like industrial, quarterly thinking, achieve success within a couple of months or years. It's possible for a certain period, but not for sustainable development. For emerging countries, the most urgent task is remember it should be organic development, organic growth. But investing in the basic science now will show merits only in 10, 20, 30 years' time. This contradicts election periods, but I stop here before the time is running out. But we have more time in an hour for discussion.
Okay. Thank you, Dirk. Thanks for these comments. Of course, the book contains actually a long first chapter where we have tried to summarize all the rich lessons that we get from the remaining material, right? I want to go directly to our colleague Slavo Radosevic. Professor Radosevic is at the University College London, of course. You will know him from many publications. He is at the School of Slavonic and East European Studies. He is at UCL. He is recognized as one of the utmost experts in the transition economies of Eastern Europe. Slavo, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Nick. Do you hear me well?
Yes.
Okay, so my job is to put the book in the kind of future context, because as Jeong-Dong said at the beginning, this is a book which aimed to provide the state of the art. And this is the state of the art as we understand it in 2020. But the book started in 2016, and the way how I see the book as a kind of milestone in that process. And that process is a process which actually is a history in making, so to say. We had something which you can call 3 tipping points, or events which points that there are some structural changes going on in the global economy which will affect already the topic that we are looking at, which is the technology upgrading in emerging economies. So the first one is the global financial crisis since 2008, which as the time passes more, we see that it signifies the kind of the changing nature of globalization. It depends where you stand. Some people would argue that this is the deglobalization. Some people would argue that this is simply temporary retreat and that there will be no changes. But the common understanding is that it led to polarization within the countries, and that the issue of inclusive growth is something which is important, which has implications for technology upgrading. Second is the current global COVID-19 global crisis, which on a positive side led to this acceleration of diffusion of digital technologies, speeding up of the processes which were in the making, but it also revealed this issue of biosphere resilience and what does it mean from the technology perspective. And the third point is this climate change crisis, which is going on and will intensify in the future. Climate change has its own tipping points, but it all again pushes this issue of direction of technological change and trajectory. So these are the issues when we talk about the future context have to be taken into account. I want to argue that basically in the past, and the book to a large extent show that we approach to the technology catching up in a more kind of conventional sense, looking from the perspective of the growth defined as GDP. And that was a period where the main issues are related how you generate the growth through globalization, through markets, what is the role of the state. And the issue is now whether this agenda, this framework will continue to dominate in the future. And my argument would be that in the future, technology upgrading will be much more considered in the context of green growth, in the context of inclusive development, and in the context of increasing concern about environmental and human resilience. And there will be much more significant these trade-offs between the kind of economic issues narrowly defined and broader issues which are related to the resilience, to the green transition and inclusive technological change. And that raises for me the most important issue. What will be development economics in the 21st century? We've come out of the period where actually, if you talk about the policymakers, then if you ask them about the development, they would proudly show you, you know, their place on doing business or on world global competitiveness table. Is that something which can continue to be in the future? Probably not. So the book is at that point where I think that we will see this significant change in the thinking on these issues. Of course, there will be new questions, but I also think that there will be kind of old questions, but they're in a new context. And the old question was always, how do you balance need for openness with the need for kind of national spaces? But I think that in the new context of 21st century, that will be even more kind of magnified. And there are different answers in the book. We have chapters on China, how China does it. It's not a recipe which small countries can do it, but the balance between these two will increase. Why? Because many of the global issues, they will become even more global. Security, energy resources, environment, global health, they will actually magnify in importance. And at the same time, you have increasing understanding that you need a kind of national spaces for development, for technology upgrading. Second issue is, how do you make technology upgrading and growth more inclusive and environmentally sustainable? How do you make it in a way that they reinforce each other and that there is no kind of trade-off, in a sense, more growth, less sustainability? The third thing is that and this is what makes it completely, for me, a new question, which we didn't have historically until now, and that is the question, could direction of technological change be changed without transformation of the socio-economic regime of growth? Let's put it that way. And obviously, if you look at it from a distance academically, you will say, unlikely. Unlikely that you can change the kind of technological trajectory and that the whole socio-economic regime remains the same. And we don't fully still understand the implications of that, because implications will be on the issue of how technology is created. The issue will be whether the current model, which is the ICT base, which is kind of seemingly goes forward fast, but it creates increasing inequalities, whether this is something which is sustainable and whether this can carry on like that in the future. And that leads then to the issue about the changing nature of contemporary capitalism. Is that inevitable? In which way? So these are all kind of issues, growth, degrowth debate. This is where the issues of technology upgrading will also come into the picture. And also with this, what COVID has shown this increasing human kind of sensitivity or kind of the issues of human life and biosphere comes much more into the prominence. They come as a problem, but also possibly that is also kind of way to look for new solutions. And in that context, the challenge for people like us that work in a kind of more academic, semi-academic policy sphere is how these things interact with each other. I think that what will become much more clear is that the technology accumulation and economic growth cannot be seen anymore in a conventional sense of a catching up and some kind of known agenda and the objective. This will be much more social and political processes. We already could see it with the social media, with the ICT, but that will magnify then to all other spheres when it comes to biosphere, to security issues, and the whole relationship between state markets now understanding the role of commons in that context will be kind of redefined or will have to be redefined. So in a nutshell, what I would like to provoke you in a discussion further, I think that technology upgrading will remain useful analytical perspective, but I think that it will be much more entangled, enmeshed into new discourses, which are not so much narrow as it used to be in the past, but will go more into the direction of including the kind of social issues, environmental issues, global interdependencies, and that there will be much more linked to the kind of political economy, and that we will be probably not talking kind of so much isolated among the group of kind of innovation scholars, and then social implication of innovation will be job for somebody else, but this will be much more an issue which will come at the beginning of any discussion on technology and technology upgrading. So I want to finish on that kind of provocative note at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Slavo. To tip my hand, I kind of see it this way too. Given what is going on in the different countries around the world, including ours here in the United States as we speak. I think that we are, I also think that we are for some surprises ahead. I mean, we cannot continue the same way. But I want to now turn to our distinguished speakers. I want to invite, let me see who will come first. Perhaps Yongsuk. Yongsuk, are you ready?
Yes.
Okay.
Can I start or?
So I have introduced Yongsuk. He is in Seoul, Korea. We are looking for your comments, Yongsuk. You have seen this content now. What do you think?
Thank you, Nick. And I based in Sejong, not Seoul. And chair.
Okay, yeah.
Chair, not the vice chair. Anyway, let me thank you all for this invitation. This is a very, very good, opportunity that I can share my experiences as OECD delegations and chair, but also my personal international consulting experiences. First of all, I read the chapter 1. It was the excellent summary of all important, issues around STI policies. Although this book is titled as technology upgrade and economic catching up in emerging economies, but I think these issues, all issues that covered here, is also applicable to all other countries, including advanced countries and OECD countries. If we can replace the terms of technological catching up with the STI transition. So let me explain a little bit about that. Let me show you. I mean, I would like to highlight recent, development in OECD CSTP agenda. Just last week, we just approved 2 very important recommendations, which will be effective probably within this year. One is recommendation on international cooperation. This is actually revision of 1988 recommendation on international collaboration in science technology. Back then, the international collaboration in science technology, or just cover very basic principles of how to promote collaboration. But in this time, the revision clearly stated that the importance of emerging countries and especially the developing countries. And for developing countries, in order to promoting international collaboration, it is very much important to underline and strengthening the technological capacities, STI capacities. So in that sense, OECD is quite recognize the importance of emerging economies, and their STI capacities are very much core assets we have to promote. Another one is the standards on data. Actually, we just approved. Approved the recommendation on access to research data from the public funding. And this covers only public sector research data. Nonetheless, on top of that, another recommendation, which was just approved last week, was enhancing access to and sharing of the data. In this recommendation, the data covers all, even patents and other kind of the all overarching data. So data is quite important in the future. So OECD is trying to make some standards on how to promoting the sharing and access to all such data. So we should not forget about the importance of the data. The third one, I'd like to share one slide. Hold on, let me see. Okay, there it is. All right, here we go. This is the very recent project that the CSTP is trying to do in this year and next year. This is we call it a cross-cutting project. Probably Dirk is very familiar with that, but this cross-cutting project is named let's say societies in times of crisis and beyond, developing responsive and resilient science and innovation systems. Under there, we over the years we discussed heavily and trying to establish this framework. So one pillar is the resilience, how to make our STI system more resilient to the crisis and future crisis as well. And another one is we have to take this crisis as an opportunity to transform our current systems. And in order to do that, we adopted strategic foresight methodology. Okay, let me stop the sharing this slide. But what I would like to underline is that even in OECD, advanced countries, everyone is very much concerned about what if this current crisis means to us, means to STI policies. And this crisis actually force us to transform our current system. From that, this we call it transition. Means that in your book, the volumes all talked about how to successfully transform the emerging economies system, STI system, toward to more higher value, productive economy. So the question is the same. In that sense, I would like to. I'm very much like the all issues that you touched is very much comprehensive, very much outstanding masterpiece, and I'd like to interpret. This your volume as a reference for developing our work toward to new paradigm of STI policies for the next generation, which is that more resilient, more sustainable, more inclusive STI systems. That is my major observation from the chapter 1. Again, chapter 1 is absolutely, well summarized the all major issues and points. I'd like to say that. Also, I'm very much would like to highlight the concept of transition failure. So, as I explained, if we see every country is necessary to transform its system, then transition failure concept is very much applicable to all other countries. Another one is interaction between firm and national innovation system. Okay, innovation comes from the firm, definitely, but they are depend on the circumstances, framework conditions, which is consisting of national innovation system. Another one I very much like is the need of new policy thinking. Absolutely. Not only to emerging economies, but also all other countries, including the U.S. and China and other European countries as well. So in that sense, I'd like to inform you that there's a very interesting symposium will be held next week, Monday, at this coming Monday and Tuesday, at the OECD level. It is a workshop in the sense of in the series of new approaches to economic challenge that was have been tried for several years, but in this year they focused on a systemic recovery, which is that really try to finding out new concept of policies, economic policies, and STI policies, and labor policies, and all sector policies across the all committees to find it out what is new policies in recurring crisis era. So we see that COVID-19 is just starting. You may find if you want, I will provide the linkage there. As an international consulting experiences, I'd like to highlight the political willingness to transform and upgrading and economic catching up. Whenever I go to international consulting, always at the final stage, I encounter this question. Okay, I agree all you recommended, but political or social forces does not allow us to move on. So the final obstacle is social capacity. In that sense, I like the social capacity, terms, and which is and in order to overcome such political obstacles, I would argue that we may consider the concept of mission-oriented innovation policy. Well, in some sense, every country who made great progress past several decades showed that they focused on a mission. Even the United States, focused on one mission and very clear mission, and that may provide some motivation or momentum to overcome the surrounding obstacles to resisting the system transformation. In that sense, I would like to highlight that. And let's see. All right. On Slavo's presentation, I like this the three tipping points. Absolutely, they are tipping points. But I would like to add a few more. Another one is deglobalization caused by decoupling, especially in this phase. Even this is very much fastly moving, which is China U.S. conflict on this. This one, in this sense, in the past Cold War, the main issue was security. Now, this decoupling between U.S. and China is also security, but main issue is technology. So I would like to interpret that these days, the geopolitical conflict focused on technology as security. In this circumstances, what we should do? Especially emerging economies, what implications they have to take. That is another very important tipping point I'd like to add. And another one is Slavo already pointed out slightly, but we should take the digitalization as an independent, a separate tipping point. What I mean is, I already said that data is a very much important assets and concept in coming new era. So in that sense, digitalization it should be considered as another tipping point that I'd like to add. Okay. Also, I like very much the concept of experimentalist policy. Of course, through the chapter 1, I realized that there's many other pathways to catch up, and even new pathways is possible. And leapfrogging is everyone wants to trying to do. Then experimental policy is necessary and inevitable. So one discussion when we discussed about our project, the cross-cutting project, one is that, well, for foresighting, outlook the future challenges, we need to adopt foresight methodologies. But some others argue that, what about the evidence-based? Should we, based on evidence-based or foresight-based? So future is not, fixed and change. And now everything is changing. We should adapt. We should find, our own new pathways. Then evidence-based is really, powerful. Probably we have to have the balance between these two approach. Okay, let me stop here. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Yongsuk. In fact, I wanted to mention, I stand to be corrected. Yongsuk actually is the chair currently of the OECD's Committee for Science and Technology Policy. This is the most well-known standing committee relating to technology innovation of the OECD, right? But Yongsuk is an old colleague. Something that most of you do not know is that Yongsuk is the first doctoral student that graduated under my supervision when I arrived as a young faculty member at GW. So we go so far back. Without further ado, let me continue. I want to pass the baton to my colleague currently at the University of Campinas, Professor Sergio Sales, for his comments. Sergio, the floor is yours.
Morning, everyone. Thank you, Nick. Thank you all for the invitation. First of all, I would like to congratulate the authors of the book, the editors. Is a really a spectacular updating of this so important issue as the catching up, the leapfrogging. Actually, it's about the development of less developed countries. And I prepared some comments here. I will address some comments towards the idea that the final thing, I mean, the final idea I would like to address to you in order to discuss is about implementation. In my perspective, the main thing, the main challenge we have ahead in order to implement policies towards catching up or leapfrogging, etc., it's over the problem of implementation. I will introduce the term of science of implementation, which comes from the health area, and now it's something that we have to pay attention, because it deals with really the problem of not the policy design, but moreover for the policy how to implement well-designed policies. So I would like to share to you, with you, I made some slides here. Let me see which one. This one. If you don't see it, please tell me. I'm just putting it in the presentation form. So I would, to reach that point of implementation, the problem of implementation, I would pass through two main items. The first one is the analytical complexity that is behind the theme, the subject, and which is very, very much clear in the book. I will show you 3 slides about this. One of the first phrases in the first chapter of the book tells that the failure or ineffectiveness of technological upgrading is the key issue in understanding the nature and problem of economic growth at the middle income stage. So my question here is, well, we depart from a statement that, in my perspective, of course, it is a key issue, but I doubt if it is the key issue. I mean, it's something that, in my perspective, still to be proven. Of course, there are strong relationships between one thing and the other, but theoretically speaking, is something that we are looking for many, many years. And I think we haven't arrived yet in a good conclusion about this. But so it's, of course, this is not a linear thing between the technology upgrading and economic growth. So that's why in the book itself, we find a lot of other issues that are correlated to this relation between technology upgrading and economic growth. This is another phrase that is in the book: technology capability development is dynamic. Of course, it is dynamic and structurally changing and driven by the co-evolution of a country's technological and socioeconomic capabilities. Now we enlarge the theme, we enlarge the issues that are involved in this equation. So technological capability plus socioeconomic capabilities towards the economic growth. I think now we have a much more solid basis in order to discuss the theme. But one of the chapters also is also in the conclusion, in the final remarks, that we also have to consider two larger spheres: the technical, economic, and environmental, which is regards to the new paradigms, the emerging paradigms that some of you have already talked about, the technical, economic, and environmental, the TEE sphere, and the social-political sphere. And I would like to stress this point of the political thing, because when we see the examples that are in the book, the catching up examples, the country trajectories that are deployed in this book, we see very different paths, very different trajectories. And I would risk to say, or dare to say, that the political thing, the political structure is underneath all this trajectory and defines most of the details, the characteristics of the different trajectories of the different countries, especially in Asian countries, maybe, but also in European countries and for sure in Latin American countries. So when we put this, we enlarge more and more the context over which we have to study the problem of technological upgrading, technological capability accumulation, and economic growth, and I would say development, economic and social development. So this is more or less the scene of the complexity, the analytical complexity, which put us a big challenge in order to see if there are patterns towards technological capability, because there are so many different conditions that interfere in this process that to find out the one or two or three causalities is really a tough task to undertake. And one conclusion is one size definitely does not fit all. We have different recipes. One, for instance, is the traditional one of the catching up that comes from the 80s. Adoption, you go first for adoption, then for assimilation, imitation, and then for innovation. And the other thing which is similar to this is we have to develop this implementation capability in order to catch up. Then you have to leapfrog it towards a larger capability, a stronger capability, which is the design capability. Or taking this very well-known sequence, original equipment manufacturing, then to original design manufacturing, and to the brand manufacturing, original brand manufacturing. I mean, this is the holy grail. This is the holy thing that most of the experts and most of the people that are studying this are looking for. So different ways for catching up or leapfrogging. We have multiple and complex paths, and there are also multiple diagnoses. Is there really necessary to go or to engage in a global value chain in order to catch up or in order to leapfrog? How to deal with these new paradigms that are emerging now, the transition? Is there a matter of transition or a matter of leapfrogging directly to these new paradigms? Is there a benchmark to pursue? I think there is no benchmark. I think maybe we can deal in our specificities for some rules of thumb. I think there are some, basic rules that have to be follow it in order to catching up, in order to develop, in order to link technological upgrading, innovation, capacity, and economic development, which is not that linear and not that easy to find out patterns of catching up. And what are the paths of transition? The main question, I quoted Kuznetsov here, is one of the chapters of the book. I believe this is I'm not sure if there's the last one. Yes, it is the last one. How to design and implement programs which will recognize danger or failure. Vested interests, which is very, very strong threat here in Latin American countries. This is very rare, but here in Latin American countries, which is the region I know better, this is something that has to be considered when you design the policy, and principally when you go for implementing this well-designed policies. The low policy capacity, and as Kuznetsov mentions, is endemic in emerging countries. And the problem of policy implementation, in my perspective, and now I arrived at the point I started making these comments, is much harder to face than policy design. Well, somebody could say that, well, Sergio, policy design should include policy implementation design, or the design of policy implementation. Yes, that's right. And normally we do not find this. Not only the design of the implementation, but moreover, the monitoring of implementation. I am totally convinced that this is probably the most important issue we have to address if you want to have a successful and effective innovation policy towards economic development in our countries. Well, what's next? The underneath problem in Latin American countries is not only in Latin America, but I will take this because of I'm here in Brazil. I'm worried with our policies and our future. The question is, what are the rules of thumb? What are the main points we have to take into consideration if actually is the real situation, is the real politic in our countries, when a national or even a sectoral consultations is very hardly to obtain, to achieve. It's virtually impossible. I mean, I have witnessed dozens of STI policies being implemented in my country. And I studied this policy and I evaluated these policies. And I would dare saying that consultations among the different stakeholders that are normally involved in those policies, in government, in private sector, academic, etc., given the political base we have, it's virtually impossible. It's not impossible. Of course, we can achieve this. So that makes me think on other way around way to implement this policy, a more bottom-up approach from the micro to the macro level. I know this is not a new thing. No, it's a common perspective, but I'm almost convinced that if we depart from the micro programs that are headed to implement some ecosystems of innovation, for instance, in the more regional and local perspective, this is easier to have governance and coordination, and then to the meso and then to the macro. Of course, these things are not totally linear. They interact, they interplay, but in some sense I have witnessed much more success when the policy and the programs depart from the macro level. Would also the experimental policies, which is very much interesting, no? Make some previous pilot policies to implement pilots before going to the the big policy before going to implement the big policy will enable more effectiveness. This is something that is still to be proven. It's very rare here in my country, in Latin American countries in general, to do so. And I would like to finish my comments to address the thing of implementation science. It's something that comes from the, as I said, the health area. Is the worry with how to implement evidence-based programs policies, how to make the implementation more effective. It's not only in the health area, but also in the education. And why not to go for STI policies, no? And here I just brought some two definitions. Implementation science is defined as the scientific study of methods to promote the systematic uptake of research findings and other evidence-based practice, policy, programming into routines, which I think is the most important thing, not only for STI, but for other policies as well. And implementation science as a universal strategy to ensure that programs make sustainable positive difference. I think we should enlarge our field of research in order to incorporate more and more in this big theme of catching up, leapfrogging, development, etc. Something that has been normally neglected in our studies, which is the thing of designing and implementing the implementation, the policy. Okay, guys, thank you. This is what I had prepared. And Nick, thank you again for the invitation to come here.
Thank you, Sergio. Great comments. As a matter of fact, the word implementation, I am amazed. Two independent commentators go for this now. I am sure the third one, knowing what he is doing, I'm sure he is going to go to for the same item too. I wanted to say that I value very much the comments of Sergio Sales, because next to him I have learned a lot for Latin America. Sergio has long experience. For example, he served for 3 years in the early 2000s as the head of operational planning of the Brazilian Innovation Agency, known internationally as FINEP. So he knows what he's talking about. I appreciate very much. Let's go directly to Al Watkins. Al, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Nick. And it's a great pleasure and honor for me to be here today and to talk a little bit about this book and related issues. And let me say, I've read the first chapter with great interest, and I felt like a kid in a toy store. There were so many interesting things and so many interesting issues. It was hard to sort of determine what 2 or 3 things I could focus on in this short amount of time. But I've picked 2 or 3 things, and I'm happy to say that I believe reinforces some of the themes that have been raised by all the other speakers. This is a quote that the previous speaker, Sergio, just highlighted as well. The failure or ineffectiveness of technology upgrading is the key issue in understanding the problem of economic growth at the middle income stage. And I underlined and highlighted the words middle income because I just wanted to stress that this is an issue for least developed countries, as well as for low income countries, as well as middle income countries. So it is a problem of the middle, but it's not confined to the middle income countries. It's general, it's very broad. And let me just give you one example, one concrete example. This is from the United Nations. Africa will have 24 million more people living in cities each year between 20 and 2045. As a New Yorker, I see 24 million people. New York City has approximately 8 million people. And that means Africa is going to be 3 brand new New York cities, the equivalent of 3 brand new New York cities are going to be appearing in Africa every year for the next 25 years, and at a minimum. And so this is a tremendous opportunity for technology upgrading, catching up, leapfrogging, water, sanitation, transportation, electricity, communication, construction, agriculture, you name it. So this is just an example of all the opportunities that are out there for upgrading, capacity building at the least developed and low-income country levels where these problems are going to be proliferating. And I tend to focus on this side of it because of my work with the United Nations, and the whole work with the Global Solutions Summit is really not so much the middle income countries, but the least developed countries and the low income countries. Second point from the book, these are more or less quotes from the book. Openness to technology, chapter 1, openness to technology exchange, unless complemented by technology accumulation, does not contribute to TFP and labor productivity. I agree completely with this quote, but let me just sort of add in another quote. And this comes from a Korean industrialist who was speaking at a seminar that I organized in Moscow with colleagues from the Higher School of Economics, in fact. And he made this quote. This is back in 2004 or something like that. And I've been carrying it with me ever since, because to me, it was the mantra of what technology upgrading is all about. And he said, anyone can buy a sophisticated machine. Not everyone can use it to produce a globally competitive product. And he was talking about the challenges facing Russia, but it's true of the challenges facing every country. Anybody can buy a sophisticated machine, but do you have the capacity to use it to produce a globally competitive product? Answer is no. And I want to come back to that in this slide, something that was, again, in chapter 1, I think is very, very important. Policies that are focused only on advanced innovators will have marginal effects. Policy should target the growing number of firms with baseline innovation capabilities. What do we mean by baseline innovation capabilities? I would put firms, and this is actually from a working paper that was produced by somebody at the World Bank back in the late 1990s, and it's been ignored ever since. And yet I think it's one of the most prescient papers that have come out. And I lost access to all of these papers, so I don't know the author and I don't know the title of the paper. And it wasn't a published World Bank document, it was just sort of an internal note. But this colleague put companies into 4 categories. Category 4 are the big global multinationals, the Apples, the Googles, the Siemens, the telecom companies in Africa, those sorts of companies. These are companies that have the capacity to figure out what their technological problems are, what their technological needs are, and the ability to implement those technological solutions. So they know what their problems are, they can calculate what their problems are, and they can do something about it. At the at the first category 1 companies are the small SMEs, the mom and pop stores. They don't really know what their problems are. They don't have any capacity to do any technologically upgrading, and probably they don't need to do too much of this in any event, because they're not attached to global value chains. They're just sort of sitting there, providing goods, providing services, but not doing anything on the cutting edge, and they have no need to be on the cutting edge. But in the middle, these are the sort of companies that that quote was referring to, categories 2 and 3, companies that have some need, have problems, and some need to identify their problems, some capacity to identify their problems, and some capacity to do something about the problems. And category 2 firms are lower than category 3 firms, but they're far below the capacity of category 4 firms. And this is really where the technology upgrading and capacity building needs to focus, getting more and more firms higher up this chain. They're not going to necessarily have to be category 4 firms, but they have to be closer to it. And I asked the question, do local firms in whatever country we're talking about have the capacity to identify weaknesses, deploy solutions, and move up the technology ladder? That's a question. But then the answer is, according to this graph at least, and if you then do an assessment of firms, a lot of the firms don't have the capacity to do this, deploy the solutions and move up the technology ladder. So what do you do about this and how do you solve the problem? I don't have time to give answers to this, but I would just call your attention to the first is Proceedings of a workshop entitled by the National Academy of Sciences, Securing Advanced Manufacturing in the United States. Under President Obama, there was a concern that US manufacturing was losing out globally, and manufacturing companies didn't have the capacity to utilize the latest technology to build their capacity, not to build their global competitiveness. The firms knew they needed to do something, but they didn't know what they needed to do. They didn't have the capacity to implement the solutions. And so under President Obama, the US set up something called Manufacturing USA Institutes. You can read this report and read all sorts of articles about these Manufacturing USA Institutes, but it's an interesting example of what I've been preaching this for a long time, what middle income countries can do. And chapter 4 of this report talks about how other countries have adopted similar or variations on this theme. And these are all advanced countries. The other book is a book by me and one of Nick's students, Mike East, who made a very successful career transition from a student at George Washington University, now a career at the World Bank. And in this book, we talked about a number of different institutes that the World Bank had helped stand up in different countries, ranging from China to Nicaragua to Indonesia, Thailand, you name it, lots of different countries and how they built their capacity for sustainable growth and industrial competitiveness. So I throw these out to you as references, perhaps something useful to think about in terms of how you go about doing this. I have another question here, which isn't really necessarily discussed at length in the book, but something that I think about a lot. Can non-smart second and third tier suppliers coexist in the same value chain with smart factories? We have smart factories, robots, and then to the left is a picture of a the picture on the right is a factory in Vietnam. The picture on the left is one that I took, a factory in Vietnam. And you can see the first one is obviously not very mechanized, not very smart. What's their capacity to help to get into the global value chain of automobiles if they're not very smart in the sense of what a smart factory is? So I think what we need, besides something like a Manufacturing USA Institute, are supplier development programs that can help countries move up the value chain, identify problems and technology solutions, incorporate new technology into production processes, educate, train, and retrain workers, and most importantly, some supplier development programs that I'm familiar with. Most importantly, the thing that they really focused on that was the weakness of these companies is they couldn't stay on the cutting edge. Even if you help them get to the cutting edge, they have to build the capacity to stay on the cutting edge, given smart global value chains. So I will stop here, but I just want to food for thought very quickly. Social enterprises and SMEs can also be agents of technology diffusion and innovation, along with multinational corporations. And we ought to look at the role that they're playing, especially in low and least developed countries. I talked about smart factories. On globalization and supply chain evolution, we need to start thinking about regional value chains, the Africa Free Trade Area. I think there's a lot of potential for regions, and I think there's going to be a movement towards more regional value chains, not deglobalization, but regionalization in a lot of cases for a variety of reasons, some having to do with defense, others having to do with resilience and not depending on everything going through the Suez Canal. It's important to have programs of need assessments and supplier development programs, need assessments and supplier development programs. And then somebody was raising, I've added to this slide as I was listening to the talk, technology scouting versus endogenous technology development. I'll call your attention to a paper that was put up less than 48 hours ago on the Global Solutions Summit website, and it's called Technology Scouting and Deployment. And it talks about technology scouting versus endogenous technology development, and it talks about building implementation capacity. And I just hope you find it useful if you choose to take a look at it. So thank you very much. And here's my contact information. And again, thank you for inviting me to participate here as well.
Thank you, Al. These are great comments, actually. I want to say that some of the best examples I have in my routine in the classroom come actually from your summit. I've learned so much. So many examples, so good. I really urge everybody to join the summit. Is excellent, and it's exactly about implementation. I mean, ideas about implementing. We have a lot of things for discussion here, but before we go, I would like to ask actually the person on the editorial team of this book who has not spoken yet. This is Professor Kyun Lee. Kyun Lee is also professor at the Seoul National University in the Department of Economics, and he is also a special advisor of economics and technology to the current president of Korea. So, Professor Lee, you have dealt with many countries. You have dealt with implementation. Has anything of this attracted your attention of today's comments?
Okay. I thought that I would speak at the end, but anyway, I was preparing some PowerPoint while listening to this discussion. I can have a one-page summary of whole book and our discussion. So let me show that one just a moment. Yeah. So this is it. So we are discussing challenges that how to use technology to achieve economic catch-up in emerging economies. That's our title, right? And then the challenge is how to make a transition from imitation to innovation broadly, or from implementation to design capability, as Jeong-Dong mentioned, and in the context of a foreign domestic interface, or the technology scouting versus internally generating technologies, right? We have to manage well this interface. We have to learn from foreign, also we have to create something domestically, right? And also in the context of political, socio-political, economic interfaces. It's not easy. So we might fail. We call transition failures, or it can be called capability failures. So there's a room for policy intervention or public-private collaboration. And we are facing some opportunity or risk for leapfrogging, such as changing paradigm, fourth industrial revolution, industry 4.0, or green energy, green revolution, with a new global geopolitical context, which is US-China conflict. Okay, so this is a one-page summary of my observation of the book and today's discussion. And also in June, we have a G7 meeting coming up in UK, Cornell. I'm a panel member for this special panel global, and we are trying to come up with something called Cornell consensus. Okay, like a new Washington consensus. It's Cornell consensus. It's the place of UK in having the meeting. And the basic idea is to try to come up with new rule-based, transparent, non-exclusive international economic system. So this is UK's initiative to try to come with let's try to new rule for international economic system, which is free from any big power manipulation like China or even US, something like that. So, so we are facing new contexts in several dimensions, right? In the traditionally foreign domestic interface, socio-political economic interface, now another new geopolitical context. That's another source of challenge for us in managing this technology and economic catch-up challenges. I think. So that's my short intervention. And then I'm very glad that we are coming to the end of this series of this workshop with this book. Okay, and are you sure we are having this in open access? Nick, are you sure have open access from the beginning or one year later?
I think it's gonna be a few months later, maybe a year later.
That's what I said.
Open access. Thank you for reminding this.
Yeah. So we are having it open access at least I think one year later. So that's I have to make it clarified. Yeah.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Kun. Of course, all of you know that Kun has served as a president of the Schumpeter Society recently, right? Among many other things. His comments are very valuable for us. So I think now we should open the floor to discussion. First, any one of the panelists today could make a comment if they wish, and then we can go to our audience. We already have some people with comments from the audience. So does any panelist want to add something? Okay. So if I hear none, I think Mr. Delmont, Guka Delmont from Brazil has some thoughts. Guka, are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Do you want to ask your question directly so that I don't read?
Yes, there is two. First of all, I really like it, all the presentations. Congratulations, and I'm looking forward for the book and very nice topics that. And one point that I see, it's when professors was talking about the emerging economies, that can we, the emerging economies, should be the ones that can change more easily the way that we measure and have the indicators for the new economic systems, that the approach that was given here regarding to not just the technological change, but the innovation and the social development. How can we change our way of measuring? And if we can do that, could guide us to a not so fast economic growth. That was something that was in my head about what the professors was talking about. So this should be interesting to understand a little bit. If the economic, since we are in developing, should be the ones that changing right now instead of growing, and then let's change our way of doing things. So that is in my mind, and I think there is a lot to do with the economic catching up and how can we evolve. Thank you.
Okay. Do you want anyone in particular, or we should ask anyone from the?
No. I just want comments from who wants to get in there. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
So you guys, I am sorry to see only guys on the panel, but that's how it is. So anyone wants to address this question?
Maybe I can just, I think it's a very good point on metrics, because I've been partly involved in that because of the work on kind of semi-developed countries. And then you see the problem with metrics. And metrics, they're extremely important, because this is what drives policies. Very often you get that the metrics drive policy rather than policy, drives metrics. So I think that we at least now have come to the understanding that for emerging economies, you need a different framework to measure technology upgrading. But I think we now are moving even further now, because if we want to take into account the issues of inclusive innovation, of environmental impact, of sustainability, we cannot anymore, I think, separate that from the innovation and measure that post festum in some other sphere. That has to be brought into the metrics of innovation from the very beginning. I don't know how to do it. I've seen that there is inclusive innovation metrics already exist, but I think this is the future area, which kind of exactly points to this multiplicity or variety of objectives which have to be put into the measurement framework that is not just anymore about the economic growth in terms of GDP and catching up in a narrow sense, but it has to embrace the variety of other objectives in itself, which complicates very much, which opens everything to value system. We are entering into really an area where a kind of a narrow economics itself cannot help us much, where we have to have a really dialogue with a variety of other discourses and people. So it's a valid point, but I think the issue first would have to be kind of in academic circles also fully legitimized or defined. Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm. There are hands up. Yongsuk.
Yeah, let me add one to Guga's question. This is not directly relevant to your question, but one program that I would like to inform you is that one of the working party under CSTP is NESTI. Probably all of you know about this working party. And this working party is, currently trying to, just launching their new project, which is trying to finding out next generation of data and indicators, which reflecting the directionality of sustainability, inclusiveness, and resilience, like that. So it is not directly related to your question, which is that the emerging economy, but something new trial of the developing measurement methodologies. Let me just inform you.
Very good. Thank you, Yongsuk. And Salar Khan has a hand up.
Yep, thank you so much for all these interesting presentations. I am a PhD candidate here at George Mason University. I'm doing PhD in public policy. I have some questions, a few questions actually, maybe two questions. So one of my questions is about the, when we talk about metrics to, to respond to your comment, Slavo, when we talk about metrics, we are facing the problem of missing data in emerging economies, and particularly in low-income economies. So like recently I was working with some data set for very low-income economies, countries which are basically eligible for the World Bank IDA support. And what I found out, there was huge chunk of missing data. So, so how do we strengthen the data capacity or data capabilities of emerging economies? Even if you want to do something, right, the policymakers going to face, the international policymakers in the development sector, they're going to face this problem. So that's one thing. And then secondly, when we talk about technological capabilities, so I have been reading a lot of literature, and it is measured in so many ways, right? There are so many approaches in national innovation system literature and all those literature talking about it. And So I don't know. I mean, obviously, I would have to read the book. How do you guys measure technological capabilities in this book? And then when we talk about, that's my third and last. Okay, imitation to innovation. So obviously, this one size fit all approach might not work for all economies. We have low income economies, we have middle income economies, we have least income economies. So, you know, I don't know. I'm not quite sure if this innovation approach would work for low income economies, because I particularly think imitation, or as a concept, this was developed by someone, I forgot the name of this researcher, but you know, developing economies being as national income learning entities, right? They learn from other economies, right? So I don't know how this approach would be feasible for the least income economies, particularly those low income economies that are eligible for the World Bank IDA support. So I don't know if that approach would be applicable to all developing economies, all emerging economies. Your comments would be appreciated on all those things. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. The questions on data and on policy approaches. Who wants to?
I'd like to pick up a little bit on that third question, if I may, which is the sort of imitation in low-income countries. Give a couple of examples. Basically, some come from the Global Solution Summit. So in a lot of cases, it's not the country that is imitating anybody. But I said it in one of my last slides, you know, social enterprises and SMEs, they come in, and I'll take the case of Rwanda because I had done a lot of work when I was at the World Bank in Rwanda on science, technology, and innovation capacity building. So Rwanda's opened itself up to social enterprises which come in and are providing at the village level potable drinking water using the latest technology, packages of the latest technology, nanofilters, solar power because the villages are not connected to the grid, telemetry to monitor what's going on, and so on and so forth. So it's not that they're imitating anybody, but somebody is coming in with a package of solutions, and the country is welcoming people to do this in off-grid electricity, in potable water, and many other, and agriculture, for example. And so technology is coming in. The country is not imitating, but there are people who are coming in and helping them adapt that technology. Again, speaking in Rwanda, and this is a little bit more on the imitation line. To make a long story short, Rwanda had a flourishing coffee industry, and the science advisor to the Secretary of State went to Rwanda, and she happened to be an agro-scientist from Rockefeller University in her prior life. And she said to the president, "I'm here to tell you that you think you have a flourishing coffee industry, you have a dying coffee industry because you're not doing the essential things you need to do to keep it, from an agronomy point of view, to keep it going." The president said, "What do I need to do?" She gave him a list of things to do, and the president went out. Essentially, he hired a Rwandan expat who had a PhD in agronomy from a UK university, brought that person into Rwanda to upgrade the National Agricultural Research Institute, and with that person's leadership, attracted donor funding, brought in the latest technology, and then had a mechanism to sort of then get it out to the farmers. Again, keeping in mind that most of the farmers, when this was taking place in 2007 or something like that, they were illiterate. So they don't have, not only do they not have technological capacity, but they also don't have, in a lot of cases, essential literacy. So this is the way the imitation takes place in a lot of cases. Or it's not imitation, it's people coming in and showing new ways of doing things and then getting those implemented. So, and then that gets us to the previous set of comments about implementation capacity. How does a country that doesn't necessarily have a lot of science capacity probably doesn't have a lot of implementation capacity? The bureaucracy is not cutting edge. It's slow, it's ponderous, it doesn't the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. How do you build that implementation capacity? We talked about that at the Global Solutions Summit, and this paper that I commented, which is at the bottom of the Global Solutions Summit homepage, on technology scouting and deployment. One whole section on deployment is related to implementation capacity. So I would throw out these sorts of comments, these sorts of concepts as comments to think about in terms of implementation and imitation.
Thank you, Al. You know what? For the people on this call, maybe you can put on the chat the site of the summit so that they can look for themselves. It's a very, very interesting place. Okay. Anybody else wants to address the data problem, the data issue? Data. Okay. Go ahead, Slavo.
Data issue will be forever with us. I fully agree with the remark before. When you come to low middle income country, then you're absolutely in trouble when you want to try to show the situation, because the only available data which you will have will be about patenting and about the R&D, which are two the least relevant type of data for a country which has a, let's say, 0.1% of expenditures, or every third patent, every third year kind of. So problem is absolutely present there, but I think we have to blame also academics partly for that, because data and the need for them comes from how people understand and see the problem. If something is not legitimized as a problem, then it will not be measured. Policymakers, they pick up frameworks which are available. Remember this Keynes statement, that politician will just rephrase what he heard something from economists. So it is also what comes from academy as the relevant framework. And somehow the academic community, which is working on emerging economies, kind of didn't come to the position to influence policy, and because probably we didn't do enough of this academic work to shift the paradigm and framework. Because if we have done that, then the metrics and statistics would follow from that. My favorite kind of saying is always, because at some point in my life, I was a policymaker, I said, the main issue for a policymaker is not to tell him what to do, but to tell him what is the problem. And what is the problem? It depends how you see the situation, how you frame it. So I think this is in your PhD, you come at the end of this long chain of events. So, and there is very little that you can do in that respect, because the beginning of the problem is how people see what their problems are. So I work, let's say, currently on a low middle income country where governments wants us to do analysis of science industry links. I mean, this is the last thing that you actually should do, because the idea is that there are some kind of genius inventions within the university system or R&D system, and it just, has to be commercialized, which is exactly the wrong question. So, which means that the policymakers themselves see it in a kind of inappropriate way. So you have to change the framework, and frameworks also come from academy. So we are part of the story. So.
Thank you very much. I want who wants? Yes,
please.
JD. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to revisit Kant's first question. For low-income countries, I agree the low-income countries should have the implementation capability first. But in order to do that, I wanted to emphasize the importance of manufacturing sector again. We can see many potential, for example, for the case of Vietnam and Cambodia, just because for the case of Vietnam, maybe the GDP per capita is only 2,000 US dollar per capita, but it shows a big potential just because they started manufacturing even though it is very low level, because manufacturing sector would be a school to teach the basic capability that may be used to touch the higher level of capability. That's my comments. And I wanted to add some one additional comments for the book itself. This book does not contain one specific chapter which focuses specifically on digital transformation. We have chapters, the sustainability, environment, and so on, but unfortunately we did not. But several key concepts that has been shown in the book, such as transition failure, path skipping, and path creating strategies for catching up and inclusiveness and so on. So I expect some of you in this slide, some of you may write a good paper, maybe combine two keywords, digital transformation and technological capability or upgrading, and use our book as one of the main reference. I expect. That's my comments.
Very, very good. Thank you. Sergio, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. Just to say a few words about the question that Sala put to us. I was wondering if there is a inverse relation between the more you go for lower income countries, the more you will need to go for the basic institutional structure, the basic institutional innovation, I would say. I mean, the lack of structural facilities and services on education, health, laws, etc. These are the bases over which we will be able to talk about technological upgrading or to talk about innovation in terms of catching up. I think, and maybe because this is the main problem, when you go even for the middle income countries, low middle income countries, we will find this as the main problem. I mean, a problem of governance, a problem of having the basic institutional structure in order to implement, in order to invest in innovation or in technological catching up. So I guess we have a grade of different focus. The focuses have to be put on this structural things beforehand. This is more or less my comment. I mean, you have to, of course, we are talking here in this book about the middle income, but if you go, the more you go for low income, the more you need to focus on this structural, institutional things. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very, very, very correct. I wanted to turn, we are reaching the end of our scheduled time today. I wanted to turn to Professor Kyun Lee, in case he has some final remarks.
Yes, I have some announcement to make. Do you see my PowerPoint?
Yes.
This is the announcement for special issue on industrial policy for sustainable development by journal called Review of Evolutionary Political Economy by EP. So I'm the guest editor with Anna. So I hope you can have a time to consider this special issue. If you have any paper linked to these issues, you can send abstract by end of May to one of our editors. Okay, it's about new generation of industrial policies. And another event I'd like to call your attention is that online workshop on to celebrate pre-launching a book with Cambridge, Intellectual Property, Innovation and Global Inequality. I'm also one of the guest editors this book. So we're having workshop with Francis Gary, who is the WIPO General Secretary, and also Stiglitz in the same session with us about talking the innovation and innovation inequality issues. So this is open to everybody if you register. I put up this PowerPoint with this information in our chatting room, so you can find detailed information about these two, the useful information about special issue and online event. Okay, so I thought this is useful for this audience. Okay.
Thank you very much. Does anybody else want to offer closing statements? Because we are at the very end. Can you? Okay, Yongsuk will come next. Professor Lee, can you stop sharing your screen now?
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Yongsuk.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, very short. One of observation is that policy capacity. Some of you are already mentioned about it, but I'd like to highlight the policy capacity is also very much important to make a successful and effective transition. So I'd like to highlight that. In that sense, probably where the Sergio's presentation, you have a nice graph, figure which tells the technological capacity and socioeconomic capacities reaching to economic growth. And between, if you may, put this policy capacity, probably it would be very much perfect. And also, I'd like to very much thank you for this invitation. It was very much honorable and very much fruitful. Thank you.
Thank you, Yongsuk. Sergio, you had your hand up. You want to say something?
No, it's not.
Okay.
It's not raised anymore, Nick. No, I have no comments.
All right. So I am afraid we need to close here. We close this series of 5 workshops now. They have been taking place since last November on this book. Several authors of book chapters presented their work here. The same people also came to Campinas in the mid of 2019 to present the first drafts of their chapters. It was a great meeting. I think we enjoyed it all. And as you see, many of the presenters today showed that a lot of work is going on these topics. This is a very, very hot topic. So we hope in the next few years there will be a lot of new ideas, and I want to invite the young people in the audience particularly to think that the field is wide open. Somehow, when you are young and new, you're starting in a new era, you think that everything has been said. And my advice to new PhD students, candidates, is that nothing has been said. Everything is wide open. So this is my advice generally to everybody. So thank you very much. Thank you to my co-editors. Thank you to the chapter authors. Thank you to the 3 excellent commentators today, and everybody else who has participated in these workshops. Thank you very much. And in June, look for this book. It will be released in June as far as we know. Thank you very much.